That's not bright. Let's have a closer look. Okay, two things here. Firstly, this isn't fitting very well because of the resin, and also the silicone bead is preventing it from going fully on, so there's a bit of a gap. Secondly, there's the, as I said before, the back of the towel piece, the seat base, is stopping some of that light getting through. It's just kind of like it's too high in effect. And thirdly, this LED has already got a black filter over the top anyway, so I need to I'm not totally given up on it, but it's going to take a bit of work. I think I'll take this off first and have another look at it then, because the LEDs might be a little bit brighter. It may be that I can move this closer without it fouling anything, which may make a bit of a difference. We shall see. So, not a resounding success by a long shot, but not a total disaster. I'll do a bit more work on it, and we'll see how it turns out. I quite like it. Okay, right, I decided to do a little test. So, here is my LED, bright, powerful, allegedly, and I've cut off the smoked glass. I couldn't take it off because it was glued, bonded on, whatever. So I've just hacked off the front for the moment, and I'm thinking, how bright is this? How bright does it need to be, and so on. So I'm going to do a bit of a test. So I've set the camera up to roughly what I consider to be the average height that you're going to see this at from a car. It's a bit better. It's not very bright at all. Okay, and without the towel piece, obviously an awful lot brighter. Okay, that's test one. So this is test two. Now this is the modified original seat, where I put a custom LED strip, which I think was about $5.99 off eBay, something ridiculous. And so this is what I will be using when I'm carrying a pillion. Yeah, that's very bright, I have to say. And this, for those of you that might recognise it, is the original LED towel brake light from the original Griso. And the funny thing is it looks, when you stand behind it, it looks incredibly bright. And yet when you stand from anything other than directly behind, which I guess is the intended purpose, it's really quite dingy. And then I guess what I'm saying is that this has got an awful lot of reflective area. In fact, there's only 3 LEDs. But the rest of the entire backlight is a series of mirror-like surfaces. And I must admit, it's I would fancy something very bright. So, what does this mean? Well, it means that clearly this in its current form is not going to be bright enough for several reasons. It has obviously a much smaller surface area than the original, and it's blacked out, as you see a lot of the boy racers that spray up their Corsas and Fiesta backlights to look cool, and then of course you can barely see the lights, let alone any brake lights. But it is very thick, as I said, because of the nature of the curve. To get it covered on the sides, it is very thick in the centre. and right the way down the centre, including the round bit. So, and it is thicker than I need it, because it's it sounds like it's only about half a mil or a mil standing up, but by the time that's sanded off, I'm going to try and get a Dremel and sand down using a little rounded sanding disc the entire surface, so that it's a consistent sort of thickness. The other thing is that if you look at the seat base, so you can see that sufficient in this light, but this part of it here comes out so far that it's actually sort of shielding some of the light which is sort of coming through, so the bottom half is sort of being shielded by this. Also, of course, there's no mirrored finish in this at all. It's all almost matte black, so it's sucking the light out of the LED. So I haven't given up entirely, and my next step, I think, is going to be to, I think, remove part of this step here, and to also look at some way of mounting the LED such that there's some form of cone, if you like, which I can then cover in, say, silver foil to bounce the light around and focus it and concentrate it out through the aperture. And I can already hear my brother saying, "Why would you bother? Throw it away and start again." But I quite like the design, and I just want something a bit different. You know. Right, I have used the little mini belt sander, and I've removed all of the excess material because I had an issue with it being flat, thicker, darker in the center. And I also used a Dremel with a little stone grinder to remove all of that extra thickness at the back, to get right into that corner around there, so that now fits properly onto the seat base. So now I have a much more consistent thickness of the lens material, the resin. So when you can see that now, it's nice and even, and yet it still appears black when there's no light behind it. So what I've got to do now is to use various fine grades of emery paper to get that nicely polished so that it doesn't appear to be quite so opaque. And then I will use some emery paper to reduce that extra thickness so that I get it nice and curved, and I'll be using a piece of foam with it wrapped in emery paper. So with some water to get that as finely polished as possible, to see whether or not it's starting to sort of look fairly reasonable. That was so hard. The emery paper just wasn't touching it at all. So I used the Delta sander, and I used grit it says now. I think it was 180. So quite gritty, but that's done the job. Now I can start to move down the papers, starting with 240, getting finer and finer until we get a reasonable polish on it. So it's all freshly rubbed down. It was grey, but during the lockdown and the period of inactivity, just doing a few little bits and pieces, I dropped it 3 times. So suitable little chivs and cracks. So I filled all those in, rubbed it all back down, and I have put some clear plastic stone chip, you can just see it glinting there, over the top of the resin. And what I'm thinking is I've cut that slightly inside of the actual resin slots, and I'm thinking etching primer, grey primer, black. Hopefully that won't build the paint levels up too high, and then I will peel off the clear plastic stone chip, which is just like thick sort of vinyl, and then I'm going to clear coat it. If it's a bit ridgy, I might have to just rub it down very gently, but I don't want to rub off any black, obviously, and so the black's not very thick. And then clear coat the whole thing. If it's still a bit ridgy or the surface a bit iffy, then I can put some clear stone chip wrap over the top, because that really works well on the Ducati and stops any stone chips and gives it a very high gloss finish as well, which you can polish as well. So that's what I'm about, and I've painted the inside around the resin as well, just in etching primer. Won't see that, of course, but that's just to stop any light creeping through the fiberglass, because right. So I've sprayed it black just to get a feel for the colour and the shape, and I have to say, since I dropped it and repaired it, and I think also when I was taking off the excess resin, it has distorted a little bit, so I'm not happy with the finish as it stands at the moment. So I've got a few lumps and bumps that I've got to sand out, but before I do that, I thought I'd just test out. So this is the grill with the bits of clear plastic on, which I sprayed over. So you can just see, and I think once that's cleaned up and clear coated, you shouldn't see it too much. It will just look like black until, of course, the light comes on. So let's just test that light now. I will continue with this.